I'm staying at Beatrice's tonight, don't wait up. That was the text my boyfriend sent me. My reply, thanks for letting me know. Then I packed every single thing he owned into cardboard boxes and piled them right outside her front door. His panicked 3:00 a.m. phone calls were only the beginning. Hi everyone, thank you for being here to listen to my story today. Before we get into it, I'd love to know what city you're watching this video from. Feel free to share in the comments below. Now, let's get into the story. My name is Audrey, and I want to tell you a story about how my seemingly perfect life fell completely apart in about a week, only for me to build it back up again. If you met me not too long ago, you would have seen a woman who thought she had it all figured out. I was 25, had a stable, hardened career in software design, a cozy little apartment of my own that was my safe haven, and a boyfriend I thought I'd marry. His name was Spencer. For 2 years, Spencer was my entire world. He had this boyish smile that could melt away even the worst days, and a charm that just drew you in without trying. We met through mutual friends at a backyard summer barbecue. I remember him spending an hour listening to me ramble about my love for vintage science fiction, asking questions, and looking genuinely fascinated. He made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I fell hard. The first couple of years were, well, wonderful. We took road trips down the coast, singing along to terrible 90s music and stopping at every roadside diner. He remembered the tiny details, like how I took my coffee or my favorite flowers. For a long, long time, I thought he was my forever. About 8 months before everything happened, he moved into my apartment. It felt like the natural next step. We were serious, we were building a future. A few months before that, he had been laid off from his marketing job. I could tell it was a massive blow to his self-esteem, and he was trying to launch a new consulting startup. He promised that once things took off, he would start saving for our future. He'd sit at the dining table with his laptop, drafting business plans and talking about the massive potential. So I told him not to worry. We're a team, I'd say, rubbing his shoulders while he stared at spreadsheets. My salary can cover us for a while, you just focus on building your dream. I meant it. I covered the rent, the utilities, the groceries, everything. I truly didn't mind. I loved him and I trusted him. I saw it as an investment in our life together. I'd come home from a long day at my office and cook dinner while he made important calls. I'd pay off the credit card bills at the end of the month, seeing his charges for lunches and coffee, telling myself it was a business expense, part of the networking he had to do. But recently, something had shifted. It was a subtle change, the kind you almost convince yourself is in your head because the alternative is too painful to consider. That initial ambitious drive of his had curdled into something lethargic and secretive. Spencer was supposedly working late hours, glued to his laptop in our spare bedroom, but he never seemed to have any actual results to show me. No new clients, no progress he could explain. When I asked about his day, it was all vague talk about networking and setting things up. And then there was his phone. For the longest time, his phone had just been a piece of technology. He'd leave it on the coffee table, the kitchen counter, screen face up without a second thought. But over the last few months it became an extension of his hand. It went everywhere with him, always face down and always locked. I remember one evening a few weeks before the end, I was cleaning up after dinner. He had left his phone on the counter, and I picked it up to wipe beneath it. He spun around from the sink so fast he flinched, his eyes wide with panic. It was as if I'd picked up a venomous snake. "I've got that," he said, snatching it from my hand with a forced, tight smile. He never left it out again. I tried to shake the uneasy feeling. I really did. I told myself I was being paranoid, that his business stress was making him jittery. Loving someone meant trusting them, but trust is a hard thing to maintain when the person you love starts building invisible walls around themselves, brick by invisible brick. I kept thinking back to something my dad used to tell me. He passed away a few years ago from a sudden heart attack, and the grief still catches me at the oddest times. He was a man of few words, but he was my anchor. He left me a small inheritance, just enough to help with the down payment on this apartment, and I always felt his presence here. When I was 17, crying my eyes out over a high school heartbreak because a boy had cheated, my dad didn't give me a grand lecture. He didn't tell me there were other fish in the sea. He just sat on the edge of my bed, placed a firm, steady hand on my shoulder and said, "Audrey, a man who hides his phone is a man who has already checked out. Never beg someone to stay who has already walked out the door." At the time, I think I rolled my eyes. It sounded so dramatic. But now, sitting in my apartment with a knot of suspicion tightening in my stomach, every time Spencer came home late, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, his words felt less like advice and more like a prophecy. Then the text came. It was a Tuesday evening. I'd had a great day at work, one of those rare, satisfying days where every line of code ran perfectly. I came home feeling optimistic. I decided to make Spencer's favourite meal, a slow-simmered bolognese sauce over pasta. I had music playing, a glass of wine poured, and the apartment smelled of garlic, oregano, and simmering tomatoes. It was one of those simple, domestic moments I used to cherish. At around 7:30 p.m. my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, smiling. I honestly thought it was Spencer, telling me he was finally on his way home and was looking forward to dinner. I picked it up. The smile slid off my face the moment I read the name. Spencer, my heart gave a hopeful little flutter. I opened the message and the axis of my world tilted. It wasn't long, it wasn't even overtly cruel on the surface, but it shattered my world in 11 simple words. It read, "Staying at Beatrice's tonight, don't wait up." Beatrice, his co-worker. The same Beatrice whose Instagram photos he liked at 2 in the morning. The ones of her in cocktail dresses on weekend trips, marked by a trail of his red hearts. The same Beatrice who laughed just a little too loud, a little too long at his jokes during office parties, touching his arm as she did. The same Beatrice he swore was just a friend, telling me I was crazy for even questioning it. My pulse, which had been humming along to the rhythm of my evening, slowed to a crawl. I could feel the blood draining from my face. I stood there in my warm, fragrant kitchen, staring at the glowing screen. The sauce on the stove began to bubble too violently, threatening to burn. But I didn't notice. It was like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. A movie about a woman whose heart was breaking, and she didn't even see it coming. For a split second, my first instinct was denial. My brain scrambled for a logical, innocent explanation. Maybe it was work, a late-night project. Maybe her power went out and he was just being a good friend helping her meet a deadline. Maybe. But my second instinct, the whisper from the deepest, most honest part of me, told me the truth. The truth I'd probably known for months but refused to look at. He had made a choice, and it wasn't me. He hadn't even bothered to lie this time. He just stated it as a fact. My fingers felt like lead, numb and cold, but they moved. I typed my response. My hands shook, but my message was calm, deliberately calm. "Thanks for letting me know." That was it. No questions, no accusations, no uppercase, "Where are you?" Just a few simple words that sealed his fate. I hit send. I stood in the kitchen for what felt like an eternity, staring at the pan on the stove. I'd forgotten about the vegetables I was sauteing to go with the pasta. The onions were blackening now, a bitter plume of smoke stinging my eyes. Or maybe that was something else. My chest should have been burning with anger or shattered by heartbreak. I waited for the wave of pain to hit, to knock me off my feet. But it didn't. Instead, there was just this hollow stillness. The kind of quiet that comes after a hurricane has passed and you look out to see nothing but wreckage. You're just numb. I thought of my dad's words again, clear as day. A man who hides his phone is a man who has already checked out. Spencer hadn't just left tonight. He'd been gone for months. I just hadn't wanted to see it. This text wasn't a confession, it was just a formality. I reached out and turned off the stove. The burner died with a final, decisive click. The bitter smell of burnt onions filled the room. I set the spatula down with a quiet, deliberate tap. The weight of betrayal is heavy. It presses down on you, threatening to suffocate. But beneath it, something else began to bloom. It was cold, precise, almost surgical. It was resolve. If Spencer wanted Beatrice's bed, he could stay there permanently. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the pan of burnt vegetables against the wall, though a part of me wanted to. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet where I kept old shipping boxes from when I'd first moved in and from deliveries. I pulled out the first empty one I could find, a large, sturdy box that had once held a bookshelf I ordered. I carried it into the bedroom, our bedroom, and set it on the bed we shared, right on his side. Then I began to fold and pack piece by piece. The first shirt I folded was an old grey hoodie, soft from years of wear. It was the hoodie he'd draped over my shoulders on our first date. We'd gone to see an indie film, and as we walked home discussing it, a sudden summer downpour caught us off guard. We huddled under an awning, laughing, me shivering in my light dress. He'd taken it off and wrapped me in it. It smelled like him, like clean laundry and a faint, woody cologne. For a brief moment, my fingers lingered on the soft, worn fabric. The sting of memory was sharp and fast, like lemon juice in a paper cut. Then I flattened the hoodie, smoothing out the memory with a brutal finality. I placed it at the bottom of the box and reached for the next item. This wasn't just packing clothes, it was an exorcism. I was dismantling a life. I was dismantling the lie I'd been living in for months, maybe longer. One box became two, then three. I worked with a strange, rhythmic efficiency, feeling entirely disconnected from my own body. It was like watching someone else perform the tasks. My hands moved with purpose, ripping shirts from hangers, pulling jeans from drawers. The motion was soothing. Shirt, fold, stack. Pants, fold, stack. It felt like with every crease I smoothed, I was ironing out another corner of my life, erasing him from it. I was a machine, fueled by a quiet, icy rage. I cleared out his side of the closet first. The suits he'd bought for interviews but rarely wore. The button-downs I'd ironed for him 100 times. His ridiculous collection of graphic tees he refused to part with. All of it went into the boxes. From the closet I moved to the dresser. His cologne bottles stood there like miniature glass monuments to his dishonesty. I remembered him telling me once that Beatrice had complimented him on his cologne. At the time I'd thought it was sweet. Now it felt like a clue I'd missed. I wrapped each one carefully in bubble wrap, not to protect them, but because the methodical process of tapping them up kept my hands from shaking. Into the box they went. Next was the bathroom. This felt like the greatest intrusion. It was the most intimate space we shared. His toothbrush was still damp in the ceramic holder next to mine. For a second I had a physical urge to snap it in half. Instead I tossed it into a Ziploc bag. His razor, the half-empty bottle of aftershave he swore by. Everything was swept into a toiletry bag and zipped into the corner of a suitcase. I even wrapped the cord of his electric trimmer with extreme precision, as if my neatness could mask the chaos roaring inside me. I swept through the apartment, room by room, hunting for every trace of him. His gaming console by the TV, the tangled mess of cords behind it. I unplugged them all, wrapping them neatly. The games he'd bought with money from our joint account, the one where only my paycheck was being deposited. The book he was halfway through on the nightstand, his muddy sneakers by the front door. Nothing was spared. By midnight there was no sign of him left. It amounted to 8 cardboard boxes, 2 large suitcases and a duffel bag. His shoes, his ties, his laptop, even the ridiculous mug he claimed was a gift from his grandmother, though I knew for a fact it was from IKEA because I'd been there when he bought it. I packed up the last trace. Spencer was gone. I'd even stripped his pillowcase from his pillow and taken his towel from the bathroom hook. I wasn't going to sleep on his lies, and I wasn't going to dry myself with his deceit. I folded the pillowcase neatly, placed it on top of the final suitcase and stepped back. Without his clutter, the apartment looked different. Bigger, cleaner, lighter. Even the air felt different, like a weight I hadn't realized was pressing down on me had finally been lifted. I took a deep breath and it felt like my own space again. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 10:15 p.m. The decision formed in my mind like a flash of lightning, clear and absolute. I wasn't going to let these boxes sit in the corner, gathering dust like some pathetic shrine to what we used to be. He didn't deserve a single square inch of my home, even in cardboard form. They didn't belong here anymore. They belonged where Spencer chose to be. My car keys were on the hook by the door. I grabbed them and the real work began. Trip after trip, I carried the heavy boxes down the 2 flights of stairs from my apartment. My muscles ached, my arms burned, and my breath came in heavy, ragged gasps in the cool night air, but I didn't stop. It was a workout, a punishment, and a cleansing all at once. Every box that settled into the trunk of my car felt like a period at the end of a sentence. This was over, the finality of it was exhilarating. By 10:45, the car was packed so tight I could barely see out the back window. The suspension groaned under the weight of 2 years of a relationship. By 11:00, I was driving through the city, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove in the silence, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I knew exactly where I was going. Months ago, I dropped Spencer off at Beatrice's apartment building for what he'd called a team-building meeting. I remembered thinking at the time that the place was awfully fancy for a mid-level co-worker. It was a modern brick building with manicured shrubs and a water feature in front. The kind of place where people pretend to have perfect lives. Call it fate or just pure luck, but as I pulled up, a pizza delivery guy was just leaving the building. He held the secure front door open for me, assuming the suitcase I was dragging was my own. I gave him a tight nod and slipped inside before the door clicked shut. Her apartment was 3B on the 3rd floor. I didn't take the elevator, of course. I took the stairs. I wanted to feel the burn in my legs. I wanted the physical exertion to match the emotional cost. When I reached the 3rd floor landing, I could hear the faint bass of music playing behind one of the doors. Then I heard it clearly. Laughter, a woman's laugh higher pitched than mine, sharp and carefree. I didn't linger, I didn't need to, I knew. I didn't knock, I didn't make a sound, I just started stacking. One by one I brought the boxes, the suitcases, the bags up the stairs and lined them up neatly outside her door. It took me 4 trips. I worked in silence systematically. I built a wall of his life right outside her entryway. 8 boxes, 2 suitcases, a monument to betrayal, a monument to the end of my 2 years. On the very top of the box tower, right at eye level, I placed a folded piece of paper. I'd written it in the car before coming inside. The note was simple: Spencer's things, he's your responsibility now, Audrey. I took a step back, pulled out my phone and snapped a photo, not out of malice, not to post online but for myself. It was proof to myself that I'd actually done it, that I hadn't just screamed into a pillow or thrown plates. I'd taken control. As I walked away, my heart wasn't pounding. Instead, with every step I took away from that door, my pulse grew slower, calmer, steadier. By the time I slid back into the driver's seat of my car, the silence inside me was so absolute it was almost frightening. No anger, no sadness, just nothing, emptiness. I got home at 11:30 p.m. The apartment felt wonderfully, beautifully empty. The first thing I did was search for a 24-hour locksmith on my phone. By midnight, a tired-looking, friendly man named Gus was at my door changing the locks. It cost me $180. It was worth every single penny. The heavy click of the new deadbolt sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of safety, the sound of a new beginning. But I wasn't done. The lock was just the physical barrier. I needed the digital ones too. I sat on the couch, which felt suddenly huge without his presence, and began the purge. I imagined myself as a cybersecurity expert, clearing a stubborn virus from a system. I updated the passcode on my electronic door lock. I logged into our shared Netflix account, the one paid for by me, clicked sign out of all devices, and changed the password. No more free rides. I did the same for Hulu, for every service we shared. His digital ghost was being exorcised with every click. Then I opened my banking app. He had an emergency credit card linked to my account. He was supposed to use it for, well, emergencies. But lately I'd noticed daily Starbucks runs, lunches I knew he was having with his work friends, and online game purchases. It was a slow, steady drain on my finances, another way he was taking from me without giving anything back. I navigated to the card management screen. A picture of the card popped up. I tapped the button, Cancel Card. A small window appeared asking for the reason. I typed, No longer an authorized user. Done, a small, simple action, but it felt like I'd just unlatched a parasite. When it was all over, when the last digital connection had been severed, I went into the kitchen. I looked at the ruined bolognese on the stove and the charred vegetables. I scraped them into the trash without a second thought. I opened the bottle of red wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. I figured this qualified. I poured myself a generous glass, sat back on the couch, and hit play on a historical drama he always complained was too boring. At exactly 11:47 p.m. the first call came. The screen lit up with his name, Spencer. I watched it, took a sip of my wine and let it go to voicemail. 11:49 p.m. second call, ignored. By midnight the texts started flooding in. I picked up the phone to read the first few. Audrey, what is going on? Where are my things? Beatrice is losing it. This isn't funny. Answer me. I turned the phone face down on the coffee table. It buzzed against the wood in a frantic, desperate rhythm. I let it vibrate itself to exhaustion. On the other side of town, the boxes he used to call home were stacked neatly outside someone else's door. And here, in my quiet, clean, blessedly empty apartment, I felt free for the first time in months. By 12:30 a.m. the vibrating hadn't stopped. My phone was lit up like a fire alarm. Calls, texts, voicemails stacking up one after another. It was a digital temper tantrum. Out of a morbid curiosity, I flipped it over. It was a cascade of panic. Audrey, seriously, what actually happened? Beatrice's neighbors are complaining about the boxes. Pick up, you can't just do this. My laptop is in one of those boxes. My entire life is in there. Your entire life, I thought. What about mine? I didn't reply. At 1:00 a.m. my doorbell rang. A sharp, urgent buzz that cut through the silence of my apartment. Then it rang again, and again, followed immediately by a fist pounding on the wood, rattling the doorframe. Audrey, Spencer's voice echoed in the hallway, muffled by the door but heavy with an anger that was rapidly turning into desperation. Open the door, you're being crazy, let me in. I got up from the couch and walked to the door, still holding my wine glass. I looked through the peephole. His face was distorted by the lens, his features twisted into a mask of fury. I leaned my back against the wall next to the door, arms crossed, and just listened. I could see through the peephole that the lights in my neighbors' apartments were beginning to click on, one by one. A petty part of me, a part I'm not proud of but was definitely there, considered just letting him yell until the whole building knew exactly what kind of man he was. Let them see the charming Spencer unravel. Instead, I unlocked my phone and sent him a single text. You chose to stay at Beatrice's. I just helped you finish moving. The pounding stopped, silence. For about 10 minutes there was nothing. I thought he might have finally gotten the message and left. Then my phone buzzed again, another text from him. You're going to regret this. A threat, how predictable. At 3:00 a.m., a different number popped up on the screen. A number I didn't recognize, but I had an inkling who it was. He was probably using Beatrice's phone. Against my better judgment, I answered, but I didn't say a word. I just waited. Audrey, Spencer's voice cracked. The anger was gone now, replaced by a shaky, pleading tone I hadn't heard in years. It's me. You have to listen to me. Nothing happened, I swear. I fell asleep on her couch. We were working. I almost laughed. Nothing happened, I whispered, a sound I think was more unsettling to him than if I'd screamed. Then why were you at Beatrice's apartment, Spencer? On her couch? Why her apartment and not your own? It was just a late night for work, he stammered, the lie sounding flimsy even to him. We were finishing a report. It got late and she said I could crash on the couch. It was innocent. For work, I repeated, and this time a bitter laugh did escape. Spencer, there are hotels, there are late-night diners, there are Ubers that could have brought you back to your own bed. Don't insult my intelligence after everything you've done. You don't get to do that. There was a pause on the line. I could hear his breathing. I could almost picture him running a hand through his hair in frustration. Then his tone shifted again, this time to pure, pathetic pleading. Where am I supposed to go right now? My keys don't work. All my stuff is in the hallway of her building. I closed my eyes, the warmth of the wine still in my veins. I thought about his question. I thought about him standing in the cold, locked out of the life he'd thrown away, and I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no remorse, just a profound, beautiful sense of finality. Where you stayed last night seems like the obvious answer, I said, my voice as flat and calm as a frozen lake. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting. I could feel his shock, his disbelief that I hadn't broken down, that I wasn't crying and begging, that I wasn't letting him back in. He was used to me being his safety net. The net was gone. Before he could say another word, I hung up. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. The sun was streaming through my windows, and for the first time the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. I made a pot of coffee and sat by the window, actually enjoying the moment. At around 8:30 a.m. my landlord, Mr. Henderson, called. Good morning, Audrey, he said, his voice pleasant. Just wanted to confirm you changed your locks last night. I got an alert on my system. Yes, I did, Mr. Henderson. I'm sorry for the late-night call-out. He chuckled. Don't you worry about that. I figured something was up. Your boyfriend showed up at my office first thing this morning looking like he'd slept in his car. He claimed it was all a big misunderstanding and that he'd lost his keys, demanded a spare set. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected him. The word felt good on my tongue. Ex. Right, well, he swore up and down he was on the lease, claimed he had tenant rights. He doesn't, I said firmly. Never has, he's never paid a dime of rent and he's never signed a single document. His name is nowhere near that lease agreement, and you know that. I'd insisted on that from the very beginning, a small act of self-preservation that I was now incredibly grateful for. Good to know, my landlord said, a distinct note of amusement in his voice. That's exactly what I told him. He didn't look too happy about it. Don't you worry, if he comes back around I'll handle him. Have a good day now. But I knew Spencer wouldn't go quietly. Men like him don't just fade away. Sure enough, by 9:00 a.m., the flying monkeys descended. His fiercely protective, overbearing mother, Brenda, was the first to strike. My phone rang, her name flashing on the screen. Against my instinct, I picked up. I wanted this over with, and that meant facing it head-on. How dare you, she shrieked, skipping any greeting. Her voice was sharp with outrage. How dare you throw my son out onto the street like garbage? I took a deep breath, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. Brenda, I said, keeping my voice level, your son texted me last night to tell me he was spending the night at another woman's place. I just helped make that arrangement permanent. He made one mistake, she hissed. He told me everything. They were working and he fell asleep. It was a mistake and you've ruined his life over it. No, I replied calmly. My patience was wearing thin. He made a choice and I'm respecting that choice. This wasn't just a mistake, Brenda. This is a pattern of disrespect and lies. This is just the first time he was careless enough to get caught. You are legally obligated to give him 30 days' notice. He's getting a lawyer. You can't just evict him, she yelled, and I could hear Spencer's bad legal advice being fed to her. Actually, I can, I interrupted. Brenda, I spent the last hour on the phone with a legal aid service just to be sure. He's never paid rent, he's never been on the lease. Under state law, he was a long-term guest, and a guest's invitation can be revoked at any time for any reason. Guests don't get 30 days' notice. You might want to tell your son's future lawyer that. You are heartless, he loved you. No, Brenda, I said, a wave of clarity washing over me. He loved what I provided, a free place to live, a safety net, and someone to clean up his messes. I'm finally done being his safety net. She slammed the phone down, but before she did, I heard the tremor in her voice, as if deep down she knew exactly who her son was. She just didn't want to admit it. Just when I thought the morning drama was over, my phone vibrated with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but when it rang a second time, curiosity got the better of me. I answered, "This is Audrey." The voice was sharp, male, and absolutely dripping with anger. "This is Jard, Beatrice's boyfriend," the voice said. "Do you mind explaining why there is a pile of some guy's junk sitting outside her apartment door?" I almost laughed out loud. The universe really does have a twisted sense of humor. "Jard," I said, putting on a layer of fake sympathy, "I am so sorry you got dragged into this. Honestly, why don't you ask Beatrice or Spencer? It sounds like they've been working on a project together behind your back for quite some time." "That's not. She said he had roommate issues and she was just doing him a favor," he stammered, trying to defend her, but I cut him off. "Doing him a favor? Is that what she's calling it?" I said. "Look, Jard, you don't know me, but I'm going to do you a favor. Before I changed my Wi-Fi password this morning, Spencer's iPad was still connected to my network. He forgot to log out. I saw more than enough of his iMessage conversations with your girlfriend to last me a lifetime. We're talking months of this, Jard. Dinner plans, late-night chats, heart emojis. If you want to see it, I'd be more than happy to forward them to you. Just give me your email address." Dead silence on the other end. Then he muttered a curse word and hung up. I put my phone down and noticed something unexpected. My hands weren't shaking. For the first time in months, I felt completely, unshakably calm. Of course, I knew Spencer wouldn't let this go easily. People like him, whose egos are as fragile as glass, never do. They don't see the end of a relationship as a sad event. They see it as a battle they lost, and they always want a rematch. Deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. It was only a matter of time before Spencer regrouped, came up with a new angle, and called me himself. That afternoon he did. This time his tone wasn't pleading. It wasn't angry either. It was something much more twisted. It was a smug, practiced tone. "Audrey," he began, his voice smooth as oil, like a CEO handling a minor PR crisis. "We need to talk. I think you're overreacting to this." I stayed silent, letting him spin his own web. "It's not what you think," he said. "It was a test." I actually let out a short, sharp laugh. I couldn't help it. "A test? Are you actually serious right now? What were you testing, Spencer? Your ability to lie to my face?" "No," he said, his voice filled with condescension, as if he were explaining a complex theory to a child. "It was a test of your love for me, a test of your passion. I wanted to see if you still cared. If you really loved me, you would have fought for me. You would have gotten jealous, you would have made a scene, you would have shown some passion. That's what women do when they care. You failed, Audrey. You didn't fight. You just gave up. That proves you never really loved me." The sheer audacity, the twisted logic of this manipulation almost left me speechless. Almost. He wasn't just trying to excuse his behavior, he was trying to make my reaction the problem. He was trying to rewrite the story to make me the villain. "What you want is a dog, Spencer," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Something loyal that wags its tail and comes running back no matter how many times you mistreat it. Something that's just happy you came home. I am not a dog. I don't chase, I replace." His voice cracked, the smooth mask slipping away. "Replace me with who?" he stuttered, the question laced with pathetic disbelief. I let the silence hang in the air for a few beautiful seconds. I hadn't planned on saying it, but the words just appeared in my mind like a perfect response. Then I delivered it. "I already texted Garrett. We're getting coffee tomorrow." Absolute silence on the line. Garrett, he was a guy from my climbing gym, a genuinely nice person. Spencer had always accused me of liking him, completely without basis. He viewed Garrett as a threat just because he was friendly and existed in my social circle. The truth was, Garrett and I had never been anything more than friends, and I hadn't actually texted him, but Spencer didn't need to know that. "You wouldn't," he whispered, his voice a mix of disbelief and bruised ego. "Watch me," I replied and hung up. That was when his campaign really started. By early evening, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Spencer had posted a long, rambling message on his Facebook page. It was a masterpiece of playing the victim, carefully crafted to gain sympathy. "I need to share my truth," the post began. "My ex, Audrey, is unstable. For months she has been controlling and emotionally difficult. Last night she suddenly broke down and threw me out onto the street for no reason, leaving me with nothing. She is trying to ruin my life because of her own insecurities. Please don't believe her lies. Pray for her." It was classic deflection, painting the victim as the aggressor. But I was prepared. I didn't reply to his post. I didn't write a long, defensive counter-argument. I didn't get into a fight in the comments. I simply took the screenshot I had saved on my phone, the one where he texted me saying he was staying the night at Beatrice's. I posted it right in his comment section. No caption, no explanation, just the image. His own words, black and white, with the timestamp for everyone to see. It was like setting off an explosion. His carefully constructed story vanished in an instant. The tone of the comments shifted immediately. People started tagging Beatrice, asking if it was true. His own friends started sending me private messages. One wrote, "Audrey, I'm so sorry. We always knew he was trouble, but we didn't know it was this bad. We're on your side." Another said, "I'm done with him. This is the last straw." Even a friend of mine, who had once defended him and said I was too harsh, texted me, "I'm so sorry, Audrey, I was wrong. He is toxic. Stay strong." By nightfall, Spencer's post was gone, deleted. But the damage was done, not to me but to him. Yet he still wasn't finished. At 2:00 a.m. another message arrived. This one actually sounded pathetic. "I was planning for our future. Beatrice was nothing. You'll regret leaving me. I was about to get a major promotion and a raise, and we were going to start our lives. You ruined our future." I stared at the words, my jaw tight. The lies were endless. He was like a drowning man, flailing his arms, trying to grab onto anything to drag me down with him. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just the desperate struggle of a defeated man. He was planning his next move, and knowing Spencer, he wouldn't go quietly, which gave me a chilling feeling. The next morning, after his smear campaign fell apart, I thought I might finally get some peace. I was wrong. At 9:15 a.m., just as I was drinking my first cup of coffee in my quiet apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a fraud alert from my bank. "Your deactivated card ending in 1234 was declined for a charge of $78.54 at Daily Grind Coffee." He had actually tried to use a card I deactivated 2 days ago. The nerve, he must have saved the card details. 10 minutes later, another alert. This time, an email from my credit monitoring service. A new inquiry has been made on your credit report by Capital One. I logged in to check. Thank you for your application. Your request for a new credit card under the name Audrey Cross is currently under review. Spencer, he had my social security number, my date of birth, and all my personal details. He was trying to open a card in my name. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a messy breakup anymore. This was a crime. This was a felony. I immediately called my bank's fraud department. I spent 30 minutes on the phone with a very helpful representative named Maria, who immediately cancelled the application and put a high-level security freeze on all my accounts. Then I called the police non-emergency line. Over the next hour, I patiently explained the entire timeline to a detective, from the breakup to this fraudulent application. I emailed him screenshots of the fraud alerts and the credit inquiries. Attempted identity theft is a serious matter, Ms. Cross, the detective told me seriously. He used your personal information to try to open a card without your consent. We can open an official investigation. Do you want to press charges? I'll think about it, I said, my voice shaking slightly, though deep down I already knew the answer. A line had been crossed. By noon, the consequences of his actions began to multiply in ways I hadn't even expected. A notification popped up on my LinkedIn profile. Jonathan Mills, senior manager at Tech Corp, viewed your profile. Spencer's boss. Right after, a message arrived. Hi Audrey, this is Jonathan Mills. Strange question, and I apologize for reaching out this way, but is Spencer doing okay lately? He has you listed as his emergency contact, which is how I got your name. Also, we noticed he submitted an unusual payroll advance request yesterday, citing your name as the reason for a family emergency. I took a deep breath and typed a professional, direct reply. Hi Jonathan, thank you for reaching out. To clarify, we broke up 2 days ago after I discovered Spencer's infidelity. He no longer lives at this address, and there is no family emergency here. I did not authorize him to use my name for any financial requests. As for his whereabouts, you might want to ask his colleague Beatrice, since he stayed at her place on Tuesday night. I believe both of them have been calling in sick since then. After a pause, he replied, I see, we have a very strict policy against workplace relationships, especially between employees in the same department. It is a termination-level violation, specifically to avoid messy situations like this. Thank you for your honesty. This clarifies a lot of things. At 3:00 p.m., Spencer called from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I'm glad I did. The anger in his voice was raw and uncontrolled. You got me fired, he screamed into the phone. No, I said calmly, my quiet voice contrasting with his rage. You got yourself fired, you ruined our relationship, you lied to your boss and you violated your company's policy. I simply told the truth when I was asked. I wasn't seeing her, he snapped. It was a mistake. Your boss didn't seem to think so, I replied. By the way, neither did her boyfriend. I hear he had a long talk with her after finding your pile of things outside her door. No job, no money, how am I supposed to survive? He demanded, his voice cracking with desperation. My career is ruined, what am I supposed to do? Maybe Beatrice can support you, I replied, my voice sweet as poison. Oh, wait. I heard a rumor that her employment was also terminated this afternoon. What a shame. Maybe you two can look for jobs together. Before the call cut off, his anger dissolved into a stream of incoherent curses. Later that evening, another call came, this time from his mother, Brenda. Her voice was no longer sharp and accusatory. Now it was softer, almost pleading. Audrey, please, he's learned his lesson. He is a mess, he was fired, he has nothing left. Please don't pursue legal action over the card. You'll ruin his entire life. Think of his future. I held the phone to my ear, looking around my quiet, peaceful apartment, a place that was finally free of his shadow. Brenda, I said calmly. He tried to ruin my credit. He tried to steal my identity and leave me with debt. He wasn't thinking about my future. He ruined his own life with one bad decision after another. I'm simply done carrying the consequences of his actions. A long silence followed, and then I heard a muffled sob before she hung up. For the first time since this all started, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because Spencer's life was falling apart, but because the mask was completely off. Everyone could finally see him for who he was, a selfish boy who played games until he lost everything. Still, in the back of my mind, I knew. Desperate people rarely just walk away. They strike back, and I had a bad feeling I hadn't seen the worst of Spencer yet. On Saturday afternoon, I was brewing coffee in the kitchen when a low rumble echoed from the street. I looked through the blinds, and my blood ran cold. It was a U-Haul moving truck, parked awkwardly right in front of my building, taking up 2 parking spaces. Then I saw him, Spencer. He wasn't alone. His 2 cousins climbed out of the cab, guys I had met a few times at family cookouts, Cody and Shane. They were big, muscular guys in cheap tank tops, the kind of people you hire to intimidate someone, not to carefully move furniture. Spencer walked behind them, looking like a general leading an army into battle. My heart didn't race. It settled into a low, heavy beat. I had been waiting for this. I knew he was too arrogant to just walk away. This was his final stand. I immediately sent a message to the group chat with my brother, Cole, and my best friend, Ramona. My text was simple. Red alert, the U-Haul is here, come over now. Both of them lived less than a 10-minute drive away. I immediately received 2 thumbs-up emojis in response. I cracked my front door open just enough to watch. I wasn't going to hide. This was my home. Cody was already working on my new lock with a screwdriver. Shane was dragging the patio chairs I bought last summer toward the truck. Spencer stood on the sidewalk with his arms crossed, a smug smirk on his face as if he had already won. His smirk froze when my front door opened wider. My brother, Cole, stepped out and stood beside me. Cole is a big guy, broad-shouldered, a former college wrestler, the kind of man who can silence a room just with a look. He is the gentlest person I know, but you absolutely do not want to cross him. He looked at the 2 cousins, then at Spencer, his expression freezing cold. Then Ramona appeared on my other side, her phone out and recording everything. "Hi boys," she said cheerfully. "Big day for an illegal removal, isn't it?" "Afternoon, gentlemen," Cole said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Planning on taking my sister's things in broad daylight." Cody froze, the screwdriver slipping from his hand and clattering onto the welcome mat. Shane immediately put the chair down like it was hot. Spencer clenched his jaw. "This is my place too, Cole. I have rights, I lived here. Some of my things are still inside." "No, you don't," I interrupted, my voice louder and firmer than I expected. "Your last pile of belongings was delivered to Beatrice's door a week ago. I have photos. You have no property here. You are trespassing." "It doesn't matter. My mail still comes here. I lived here for 8 months. I'm moving back in," he yelled, trying to stand tall. Ramona stepped forward, keeping her phone steady. "Are you talking about breaking and entering?" she asked sweetly. "Because picking a lock is breaking and entering. I'm sure the police would care about that. Smile for the camera, Spencer." Then, as if the universe itself enjoyed a bit of drama, a familiar voice called out from the sidewalk. "Gentlemen, is there a problem here?" We all turned. It was Officer Miller. His real name was Frank. He was an old friend of my dad's, and over the years he had become a sort of uncle figure to Cole and me. I had called him that morning, not through the emergency line, just to let him know my ex might cause trouble. I guess he decided to swing by on his patrol. He was in full uniform, showing his badge, even though we all knew who he was. "Would you care to explain why you are attempting to enter this property?" The 2 cousins, Cody and Shane, turned pale. Cody raised his hands, muttering that they had been misled and thought they were just helping move furniture. He started backing toward the U-Haul. Shane followed close behind, murmuring apologies. Spencer's composure finally broke. His arrogant mask shattered, and with his support gone, the only thing left was desperation. "Audrey," he pleaded, his voice high and strained without his backup. "You can't do this to me. I have nowhere to go. My mom kicked me out. I've been sleeping in my car." I crossed my arms, completely unmoved. "You brought this on yourself, Spencer. Every choice you made led you to this exact spot outside my door." "But you love me," he shouted, his voice cracking. It wasn't a question, it was a demand, it was a final, desperate attempt to pull on a thread that had long been cut. "No," I said, and the truth resonated in my own ears, clear and strong. "I loved the man I thought you were. and that man I now realize never actually existed. Frank took a step closer, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Spencer Harper," he said, his voice now entirely professional. "We have a report of attempted identity theft in your name, opened 2 days ago. Do you want to add trespassing and attempted breaking and entering to that list?" Spencer went pale, his gaze darted between all of us. Cole's glare, Ramona's phone, Frank's badge. He realized the battle was lost, the war was over, but he still tried to play one last pathetic card. "Audrey, please," he whimpered, tears filling his eyes. "I can change, I know I messed up. I'll go to therapy, just give me one more chance." I almost pitied him. For a split second I saw the boy I used to love, but then I remembered the cold dread of reading that text. I remembered him posting to humiliate me on Facebook. I remembered the chilling feeling of violation from those fraud alerts. "You had your chances, Spencer," I said, leaving no room for negotiation. "You had your chance the night you chose Beatrice. You had your chance the night you tried to forge my name on a credit application. You had your chance every single time you chose to lie instead of telling the truth." Silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Frank pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, I have a suspect here matching the description for the 459B identity theft report. I'm bringing him in." That completely broke him. Spencer turned and lunged toward the U-Haul, but the truck was already pulling away from the curb. His own family had abandoned him. Frank easily grabbed his arm. Spencer didn't even fight back, he just hung his head defeated. As they led him toward the patrol car, he looked back over his shoulder and shouted one last thing at me. "You'll regret this, Audrey. You'll regret losing me." I stood in the doorway of my home, my voice loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "No, Spencer, the only thing I'll ever regret is letting you into my life in the first place." The U-Haul disappeared down the street, and with it any remaining control he had over me. The patrol car followed minutes later, then everything went quiet. If you made it this far, please do me a huge favor, like this video, and comment the number 1 below. It lets me know you're awesome and tells me you've been with me through this entire journey. Your support means the world to me, so comment 1 to let me know you're here. Now let me tell you what happened next. The week after Spencer's arrest was strangely, deeply peaceful. It was like the air after a major storm has finally passed. My apartment, which had felt so heavy with his presence and the tension he created, suddenly felt light. The sunlight seemed to stream in warmer. The quiet wasn't suffocating anymore. It was comforting. It was the sound of peace. For the first few days, I just existed. I relearned the simple pleasures of being alone. On Sunday morning, I brewed a whole pot of coffee for myself, without wondering if he had used up the last of the beans without telling me. I sat in my favorite armchair by the window, the one he always cluttered with his jackets, and read a book for 3 uninterrupted hours. That afternoon, I decided to rearrange the living room furniture. It was a physical act of reclaiming my space. I pushed the couch to the opposite wall, moved the bookshelf, and created a home that felt entirely my own. I blasted music while I worked, playing all the slow folk songs he used to complain were too quiet. At night, I stretched out across the entire bed, simply because I could without bumping into his restless, tossing frame. Freedom, I realized, is quiet, and quiet is beautiful. Of course, the ripples of the storm remained. His mother, Brenda, left a few more voicemails. She fluctuated wildly between begging me to drop the charges because I was ruining his chance at a good future and blaming me for her son's downfall. I listened to the first one, then deleted the rest without listening. I owed them nothing. My debt of kindness had been paid in full and returned with betrayal. I blocked her number, I blocked his cousins, I blocked everyone from his world. Then about a week later, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Garrett, the friend from the climbing gym, the one I had used to provoke Spencer. After that disastrous phone call, I had texted him to apologize, explaining that my ex was trying to manipulate me and that I was sorry for dragging his name into it. He had been incredibly understanding, telling me not to worry and wishing me well. His new message was simple. "Hey, hope things have settled down. Was wondering if you might want to grab a coffee sometime this week. No pressure at all." I stared at the message for a long time. My chest tightened, but not with fear this time. It was a nervous flutter that felt a bit like hope. A part of me wanted to say no, to retreat into my safe, quiet world forever. But another part, the part that had found the strength to pack those boxes and change the locks, knew I couldn't let Spencer's ghost run the rest of my life. I typed back, "I'd love to." When we met, there was no drama, no fireworks, no movie soundtrack playing in the background. It just felt good. It was just two people sitting across a small table in a sunny cafe, drinking coffee and laughing at small things. He asked about my work, my family, and my incredibly nerdy love for old science fiction, and he listened. He actually listened. His phone stayed in his pocket and his eyes stayed on me when I spoke. The simplicity of it, the pure, uncomplicated respect, felt more healing than I could have imagined. No talk of exes, no drama, just a simple human connection. We've been taking things slow since then, cautious but steady. A few more coffees, walks in the park, and a trip back to the climbing gym where he patiently showed me a new technique. Maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to believe that real partnership exists. Not the kind built on smoke and mirrors, but the kind built on respect and honesty. A few nights ago, I was walking around my apartment with a glass of wine. I stopped in front of the front door, the one Spencer had pounded on, demanding to be let in. The wood was smooth again. I had repainted it a bright, welcoming blue. The ghosts were gone. I thought about my father's words, the ones that felt like a prophecy. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. It took me some time and a lot of pain, but I finally did it. Spencer showed me exactly who he was, a boy in a man's body, incapable of facing the consequences of his actions, and I believed him. The last message he sent me before the police took him was that threat: "You'll never find anyone like me again." Standing in my quiet, peaceful home with the blue door, I smiled, because he was right. I will never find anyone like him again. Thank goodness for that. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Sharing this with you means a lot to me. If you've ever been through something similar, or if this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. I read every single one. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because sharing our stories is how we remind each other that we are not alone. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.